I'm Brianna Robinson, and today we are talking about geoengineering and weather modification. Fun stuff, let's get into it. There's a lot of chatter on the internet these days about geoengineering and weather modification. But before we get into it, like this video to boost it in the algorithm and subscribe to see more content just like this. But what even is geoengineering? How do they modify the weather, and what do they even have the capability of doing? Can they really create a storm? Can they stop a storm? Can they redirect a storm? Can they enhance or reduce the scope and magnitude of a storm? I'm going to give you an introduction into weather modification today. And hopefully by the end of this video, you're going to feel well educated on the topic and be able to participate in productive discussions about weather modification, because it's becoming more of a topic of discussion, not just on social media, but on a congressional and environmental level as well. And I strongly believe that it's something that everyone needs to be well informed about because it affects your daily life. First of all, let's address the elephant in the room, which is that most people think of geoengineering as a conspiracy theory. Now, I love a good conspiracy theory, but this is not one of them. Weather modification is incredibly well documented, and it's been talked about across the world for decades now. It's not a secret. They're not trying to hide it. In fact, they're quite proud of it. Dubai talks about their weather modification programs, China talks about their weather modification programs, and yes, even the US talks about their weather modification programs. Where I'm from, in Orange County, California, we have the Santa Ana Watershed Project. In fact, we have weather modification projects and programs all up and down the state of California. You can look them up in your area. The great state of Texas, the great patriotic, conservative state of Texas, has a weather modification program. Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, weather modification and control means changing, controlling, or attempting to change or control the natural development of atmospheric cloud forms or precipitation forms that occur in the troposphere by artificial methods. How does cloud seeding work? Where is cloud seeding being done in Texas? How successful is cloud seeding? Like I said, not a secret. And if you think it's a conspiracy theory, you're just not paying attention. I'm going to take you back to 1961, where President John F. Kennedy stated his intentions to cooperate with all the nations on weather control. Take a listen.
We shall propose further cooperative efforts between all the nations in weather prediction, and eventually in weather control, and eventually in weather control, and eventually in weather control.
Now jump forward to the year 1962, and we have Lyndon B. Johnson talking about a weather satellite that will allow man to control the weather, stating that he who controls the weather controls the world. Listen.
It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Fast forward a couple years, and we have Rosalind Peterson talking about weather modification at the UN's Climate Change Conference.
Weather modification programs, experimental ones done by private companies, done by the United States government, done by states across the United States, are underway. There's more than 50 of them in operation across the United States. These programs impact agriculture, and there are programs around the world. International corporations are modifying our weather all the time, and they're modifying it in ways that cover thousands and thousands of square miles. Most of it is chemically altered, so that what happens is that we are putting chemicals, ground-based chemicals that are shot into the air, or chemicals coming from airplanes that change and modify our weather.
Rosalind Peterson was an environmentalist, a field researcher, and an activist. It became her life's mission to call attention to the toxicity of geoengineering and its impact on the environment. Those chemicals they spray in the sky, they end up in our soil, they end up in our food supply, they end up in our oceans. And then we have CIA Director John Brennan on using geoengineering to fight climate change.
Often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do.
In June of 2023, the Biden administration released a congressionally mandated report on using geoengineering to block out the sun to fight climate change. U.S. cautiously opens door to research on blocking sunlight to fight climate change. Once a controversial concept limited to science fiction, reflecting sunlight away from the Earth, known as solar radiation modification, could be a potentially effective response to climate change and could be taken up in the near future as a subject of legitimate research. However, some scientists say that such an exercise, if carried out, could give rise to unknown consequences arising in an alteration of the chemical makeup of the atmosphere. Yeah, that's not something we should be worried about at all. Methods proposed include multiplying the amount of aerosols in the stratosphere to reflect sunlight away from the planet. According to the Associated Press, in March of 2023, the feds plan to pour $2.4 million into cloud seeding efforts along the Colorado River. But yeah, it's just a conspiracy theory. The chief meteorologist over at ABC News, Ginger Z, did a whole special on cloud seeding and tweeted this. When I went to college for meteorology, cloud seeding was inefficient and expensive. That is not the case today. 42 projects in 10 states with hundreds of ground-based cloud seeders sending silver iodide into storms to make them snow more than they naturally would. More on GMA Tuesday, #weather modification. The amount of ground cloud seeders, hundreds across the American West, already in use, and the additional 200 plus that will go in by next season is what got me so fascinated by the state of weather modification in our country. Cloud seeding isn't new, but thanks to the aridification of the Southwest, states like Arizona and California that grow so much of our food are paying companies to make it snow more than it naturally would. North American weather consultants tell us they are making 3 to 15% more snowpack. See the story on Good Morning America. Good Morning America, like, this is not a secret. They are proud of this. They want you to see this. They don't want you to see the harmful effects. They want you to see this as a way to fight climate change. They want you to see chemicals being sprayed in the sky and into our food supply as a good thing. CBS also did a special on this where they talked about Operation Popeye. Take a listen.
Lasers? Really? To change the weather?
By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning.
Well, I remember reading the stories that China had used this during the Olympics, that the USSR had used this after Chernobyl to create rain clouds.
In the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War, to wash out the Viet Cong. We're actually using trillion-watt lasers now for floods, for agriculture, farmers, for people planning wedding parties, football games, you name it, outdoor events and agriculture and flooding and even hurricanes. All of them could be subject to weather modification.
So what was Operation Popeye? Operation Popeye was a classified weather modification program conducted by the US military during the Vietnam War. The US used cloud seeding to prolong and enhance the monsoon season in Vietnam in order to hinder enemy movements and destroy their supply routes. When the program was made public in 1971, it caused outrage and controversy within the US due to the fact that it had impacted and displaced countless innocent Vietnamese people. In partnership with the CIA in 1988, Gordon MacDonald, a top presidential science advisor, wrote a chapter in a book called Unless Peace Comes, a scientific forecast of new weapons. His chapter is called How to Wreck the Environment. In that chapter, he talks about how weather can be used as a weapon against our enemies through processes such as cloud seeding, atmospheric heating, and the creation of artificial storms, floods, and droughts. Nothing to see here, folks. And our government certainly wouldn't use that as a means to control us. No, they always have our best interest in mind. Owning the Weather in 2025 is a document that was produced for the US Air Force in 1996. You can actually buy yourself a copy on Amazon, or you can read it online for free. It explores the possibility of controlling and manipulating the weather for military purposes. Any doubting Thomases listening to this video, go purchase the book and read it for yourself.
The Air Force is on record as saying, quote, they want to control the weather by 2025, and we are not talking about just seeding the clouds for rain. Of April this year, there are more than 150 different weather modification programs around the world. Since about 2000, the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy have been spraying the entire United States sky with a toxic brew of chemicals and other biologic agents. Military and some commercial jets have been fitted with huge barrels of at least 49 different kinds of documented chemical poisons.
Did you know that using weather as a military weapon is such a big deal that we have an international treaty called EMOD, Convention on the Prohibitions of Military or Other Hostile Use of Environmental Modification Techniques? But yeah, it's just a conspiracy theory. So, okay, they've been restricted from using weather as a military weapon, but there are no laws stopping them from using it here. That is, until Tennessee made some. So what are the different types of weather modification being used? Well, there are two different aspects to be aware of in terms of geoengineering. There's weather modification, which is localized to a specific region and it's short term. Think cloud seeding a single storm cell. Then there's climate control or space weather modification, which is long-term, widespread, and requires a consistent use of chemtrails, ionospheric heaters, and satellites. You can read all about how the satellites are used in the official patent. Chemtrails are used in conjunction with the ionospheric heaters. heaters. An example of ionospheric heaters would be HAARP in Alaska, but these things exist all over the world. The chemicals being sprayed, such as aluminum and barium, create an ion cloud that interacts with the ionospheric heaters, and that is how the weather modification happens. You can actually read all about how it works in the official patent. The patent even mentions Alaska as a location for this. The Space Preservation Act of 2001 actually defines chemtrails as an exotic weapon. Why are governments around the world spraying chemtrails over their citizens if it's defined as an exotic weapon? And it doesn't stop at storms. In June of 1970, the US Department of Agriculture published a secret report called Forest Fire as a Military Weapon. It was declassified and made public in 1983. It covers fuel distribution, different types of vegetation, climate factors, and much more. Let me read you some excerpts from it. Forest fires have the potential to remove concealing vegetation, thus assisting in intelligence operations, and destroy stores and facilities over a wide area within a short time. In September 1965, SINPAC requested that the Joint Chiefs of Staff take action to expedite the development of a device capable of destroying large areas of jungle or forest growth by fire. Further research was conducted in 1968 and 1969 to determine the specific limiting factors for forest fire initiation in humid tropical forests. Both test fires and naturally occurring forest fires were observed and analyzed in Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, Australia, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and the southeastern United States. If you want to know more about this, you can look up Operation Sherwood Forest, Operation Hot Tip, and Operation Pink Rose. There was even a French scientist who was making artificial tornadoes back in the 1960s. First, they deny it's happening. Oh no, you're crazy, you're a conspiracy theorist. And then they're proud of it and they tell you it's for your own good. Is anyone else sick of the government gaslighting them? I would like out of this toxic, abusive relationship with the government. I would very much like to not be poisoned without my consent. So why make the video? What is the purpose of this? Well, I promise it's not to fearmonger. The last thing I want is for you to feel like you live in a dystopian hellscape and there's no hope. If they can make a treaty preventing military use of this technology, we can make laws preventing domestic use. Now, if you know me, you know that I almost never advocate for making more laws. We have enough of those already. However, these would be laws that would restrict the government, that would protect the people from their own government, from their unchecked power. It's absurd to me that they can do something like this. Spraying chemicals all over the sky that impact our health and our food supply, change and modify the weather without us knowing and without our consent. America was intended to have government for the people, by the people. Where did we consent to this? The first step to stopping this is awareness, getting people to realize that this is actually happening and sounding the alarm on the health and environmental impacts this is causing. I hope you feel pretty well informed on geoengineering. There's so much more that you can dig into if this is a topic that interests you, but I think we'll stop there for today. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one.